Hi everybody. First of all, thank you so much for coming out today. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the power of mindfulness and meditation. More importantly than just giving tips about how to do mindfulness and meditation, I think it's more important to understand why we need to put these into practice. So I'm going to combine some studies, some personal stories, and some techniques to try to show you guys why that's important. And so I'm going to start off with this graph, something that's probably relatable to a lot of us. The study was done on a country in Southern Asia on medical students, and it shows what kinds of stressors medical students go through. And besides the heavy workload, which is taking up a pretty large portion of the graph, we can also see that there's domestic responsibility, financial stressors, relationships, whether they be with our spouses, our partners, friendships. So there's a lot of things that are constantly causing stresses and different distractions for us. And so in what is a very, very busy life that's filled with distractions, what can we do to kind of mediate that distraction and find that calm in the very busy life that we have? And so to start off, I just want to go over a couple of stories that are kind of personal to me, and I'll start off with the picture on the left. And this isn't something that I've really shared with a lot of people, but at the age of 5, I was diagnosed with a serious speech disorder at the time, and what was happening was that certain words, especially words that started with vowels, I wasn't really able to say them properly, and what would happen is that they would kind of get stuck in my throat, and they felt like they were lodged and I couldn't get them out. And this started when I was in preschool. So this really impacted my relationships with my friends, my teachers at school, and the only people that I could really communicate with properly were my own family members. And I started seeing a speech therapist, and this went on for about 7 years. During the beginning of my treatment, my speech therapist told me that I wouldn't really be able to progress too much. My social interactions would slowly go down. I wouldn't be able to go far in school either, and I wouldn't be able to enter a college or career of my choice. But my parents, who have joined us virtually today on Zoom, if I didn't have their support throughout this whole process, and if they didn't tell me to look at the positives of the situation and not the negatives, I probably wouldn't have been able to go against all odds and completely be cured of my speech disorder. And so what they did was that they had me draw a wheel on the door of my bedroom and told me to look at the positives of my situation instead of the negatives. Like, hey, look, you're a really fun, energetic child. You're somebody who's also very kind to everybody. You have such a great smile. If you can focus on these positives rather than the negatives of this disorder that you have, then you'll be able to overcome all odds. And after those 5 to 7 years of speech therapy and focusing on the positives, I was able to get over that. And then on the right side, something that more of us can probably relate to, I can probably say that about a fourth of our class was unhappy with our campus placements. And to start, I was in that 1/4. And so I was crying when I first found out my campus placement, but after talking to my friends, even talking to our class president, I realized that there's absolutely no point in looking at the negatives of any situation that you're in. Like, every campus is going to have its positive and negative situation, and if you're just focusing on the negatives, you're not going to be able to take the most benefit of the place that you're actually at and pick up on the positives of that. And so from both of these experiences, and believe me, I've had many more, I've learned to look at the positives of anything you're in, because if you can't really control something, why would you not just look at the positives of it? And so from these two things, I was trying to just think about it, like what is the goal of our life? Like, what are we actually trying to get out of it? And I realized that everybody just wants to be happy, but we want to be happy all the time. We don't want to be happy only on Friday or only on Sunday. We want to be happy 24/7, but we always find ourselves in these situations where something is obstructing that happiness. So how can we really get to this point where we're happy all the time? And the answer, if I had to tell you in one word, is detachment. And I'll explain what this means in more detail, but detachment is not the same thing as not caring about something. It means something different, and I'll go over that in more detail. But on this slide, I'm kind of explaining what detachment means in more detail, and some of you might not know what that book on the left is, but I have been raised as a Hindu, and one of the most important spiritual texts as part of a series of scriptures is the Bhagavad Gita, and I can say that this book has had such a huge impact on my life. Every time I read this book, somehow I end up learning something new from it, and it's been passed down through oral tradition from centuries past, but it was translated to the written word just over 2,000 years ago. And the most important verse to me is this verse, chapter 2, verse 47. And what it says is that if you're trying to perform any action, as long as you are applying your 100% best efforts to that action, knowing that you can perform that action, you should not be hung up on what comes out of that action, because after performing that action to your 100% best capacity, you don't really have any control for what comes out of that action. You don't really know what can happen from that, and you shouldn't be hung up on that. And so that's what I mean by detachment. It doesn't mean not caring. You do care. You want to go through the action, but you can't really be attached and hung up on something that you can't control. So that's what I mean by that. And then that's the actual verse that comes out of the textbook. And this is just the time component. I'm just emphasizing again that happiness is not something that you should, happiness is something that you should carry with you all the time. It's not something that should be dependent on any action that you're performing or on any other person, any other object, any result. Because by saying that I'll be happy if I score this much, or I'll be happy if I get this, you're pushing your happiness further and further off to the horizon. And as soon as you get that one thing, you'll just latch onto something else and say, okay, now I'll only be happy when I get this next thing. And so what you want to do is keep your happiness like a constant part of you and carry your happiness with you everywhere you go. So that's really what we're trying to do. And this is one of my favorite positive psychologists. His name is Sean Anker. I highly recommend watching his TED Talk too. It's titled The Happy Secret to Better Work. But these are two quotes that I grabbed from his TED Talk, and I thought they were so impactful, because what he said is that if he knows all about your external life, he can only predict 10% of your long-term happiness. So that means that if he knows that you drive a Porsche, that you own a mansion, and that you're a plastic surgeon, if he knows all of those things might imply that you're very happy because you know you're living a posh lifestyle, but actually, even knowing those things, he can't predict 90% of your long-term happiness, because most of your happiness is created by the way that your brain is perceiving the world. And that's where mindfulness and meditation come in. We want to train our brain to actually see the world in a way that makes you happy all the time, that's not controlled by these external people or external events or things that are happening to you. And the second quote is saying the same thing. So you want to be able to be in this position where you can view the world optimistically and see stress as being as something that's challenging rather than threatening to you. And I just added that slide as well because I want to show it's also relevant for us. When we are more positive in the present moment and we are looking at the current state of things, we are 19% faster and more accurate at making the correct diagnosis. So if you're very distracted, not looking at the positives of the situation, you won't be as efficient in your job. And then this brings us to what mindfulness actually is. So what is it? Mindfulness is kind of like I've already implied. It's more so living in the present moment, not living in the future, not worrying about something that's already happened in the past, but being cognizantly aware of what is going on around us and trying to stay in the present moment, focus on what you're doing right now and not being overwhelmed by maybe 50 other things you have going on. Like, what is the power of focusing on one thing, doing that to the best of your ability, not worrying about what comes out of that because you know you've done what you could, and then moving on to the next task, and that helps things be more manageable for you. And so this study also shows that when medical students went through this special mindfulness-based stress reduction training for 8 weeks, it actually reduced their levels of distress, stress, increased their levels of compassion, and it actually helped them a lot too. And so some things that I've done to try and improve my own mindfulness have been contemplating when the day's over, thinking about what I did that day that I could have done better, or maybe some things that I did do well and say, hey, that was something good that I did today, maybe I can keep on doing that. And so in that process, I'm starting this active process of self-growth and trying to make active changes to my life that can, make me a better person and make me more mindful. So we finally come to a neuroscience study. So I'm a neuroscience major, so I can geek out over this all day. But there was a study that was done at Harvard on patients who were depressed, and they actually had these depressed patients go through a course of meditation, and their brain area is a very specific part of your brain that actually lights up when you feel very strongly about something, whether it's like a strong feeling of anger, strong feeling of sadness, strong feeling of happiness. This part of your brain lights up when you feel any strong kind of emotion. The brain picture on the left shows the brain of the depressed patient before they meditated, and it shows that during these situations, they were lighting up very strongly. So when they weren't trained in meditation, they weren't really able to control their feelings. But the brain on the right shows that same depressed patient's brain after they learned meditation, not while meditating, but while doing everyday tasks. So even while doing everyday tasks, the person whose brain was trained in meditation that part of their brain was not as active. And so that showed that they were better able to control their feelings, better able to control their emotions, and basically it shows that it teaches you how to live your life outside of the meditative sphere and teaches you how to act non-impulsively in various situations because you're better able to keep your mind under control because you've trained your mind to do that during meditation. And training your mind to do that is just like training yourself to ride a bike. You have to practice it, and that's what meditation is. And so these are some meditation techniques that I like to follow. Those of you who have been to my apartment know that I have a meditation chair that is dedicated for this purpose. And so some things that I like to do is, first of all, I like to stay away from other people, other distractions, just be in a quiet space. You can kind of think out loud to yourself, listen to your thoughts, choosing any pose that's appropriate to you. I like to sit down, so I'm just more focused. And I also like to take deep breaths in and out for the period of time that you've chosen to meditate for, because that helps to even your inflow and outflow and kind of control your physical sense of space as well. And then I like to focus on an object of higher attention. And by focusing on this higher object, you kind of think about what qualities you want to imbibe in yourself. But while you're meditating, you have to make sure that your attention does not waver from that object of focus, because as soon as it wavers, you're not meditating anymore. You're kind of, your mind is jumping around, you're thinking about different things. But when you realize your mind is jumping away, you have to use your mental strength to pull it back. And so that act of pulling your attention back is actually what's making you stronger. And so that's what I like to do. And then it's something that you can scale up. So you can start 2 minutes and then steadily go up. So I used to not even be able to last past 2 minutes, but now I can even go up to 30 minutes. But that took me a very long time to get there. So it's something that you can definitely do with practice. And so I guess just thinking about what this means in the wider scope of things, what is your dream job? What is actually going to make you happy in the long term, and how is meditation going to help you do that? Sometimes you look at what a job description looks like and you're like, oh yeah, that looks like something that might make me happy. And of course, these things would make you happy, but are those the only things that are going to make you happy? Yeah, you want fewer working hours, better paycheck, more vacation days, but also your dream job is going to be something that gives you the same internal happiness, internal pleasure that meditation can give you, and something that you feel like you're helping other people with. And so that's something that's truly selfless and will give you the intrinsic passion for your job and will make you truly happy, even more so than the other things. And then I just wanted to end on what some of the best medicines are as medical students. Surprisingly, they're not found in bottles, but just a few qualities that you should just, take home and remember. So meditation, Sean Anker put it in a really great way. He said that it lets your brain overcome this feeling that we have to be doing 5 million things at once. No, you can actually focus on one thing at once, just like you're focusing on that higher object of attention, and then you can focus on the next thing, and that's going to help you be more effective and efficient in the way that you're doing your job every day. And then, fearlessness, just like learning to do what is right, training your mind to make those right decisions through meditation, but doing that regardless of what other people think. Even if everybody who's not there is doing the wrong thing, still doing what you think is right. And then having a positive attitude, training your mind to look for the positives, whether that be through journaling, writing about 3 things you're grateful for, complimenting somebody, different things just to look at the positives in life rather than the negatives. And then finally, just being mindful, living in the present moment, not thinking about the future, which is not something you can control, and also not looking back at the past, because that's not something you can control either. So I think these things will really help you go far. Thank you.